Arguably, the most powerful thing our species has learned to do is to imagine something that doesn't yet exist and to make it real. And it is the social technology of storytelling that has made it possible for us to use our power of imagination together. I'm Benji Ross. I help communities understand and author their own stories. I've seen firsthand just how transformative this can be. And I'm working to develop ways that anyone who wants to experience the power of place-based participatory storytelling has the ability to do so. By the end of this video, you'll see how story shapes everything around us and how you and your community can more intentionally author your own stories to awaken futures you want to live in.
Let's go back to the origin of this story of stories. For that, we go way back. There's a classic example of our species first using our unique power of imagination, and one that makes it feel so concrete and tactile. It's of an early ancestor holding the right kind of stone and imagining within it spear tips that could be flaked off. This capability to see what isn't yet there but could be changed everything for us. But of course, this was just the start. The kinds of things we imagined must have grown in complexity, and being a social species, along the way we must have developed ways to share our visions with each other.
Anthropologists widely agree that our ability to weave shared stories was one of the decisive advantages we had when competing for survival with other species. It enabled us to cooperate in large groups, to organize around common beliefs and goals, coordinate across space and time, and to build cultures and spiritual traditions, and eventually things like cities and civilizations. This is the origin story of stories, and in many ways this is the origin story of us. It shows just how fundamental stories are to what it means to be human.
I think in our modern world we tend to think of story as entertainment, something we consume as we pick up a book or watch a movie. That perspective makes it seem like something that comes from the outside, but it is stories that form the lens through which we perceive reality.
Cognitive scientist George Lakoff argues that our minds organize our experiences into narratives automatically. We connect simple ideas into coherent arcs. We see subjects and objects, causes and effects, beginnings and endings. Even the way someone on the street looks at us, we interpret through story.
Our identity is woven from countless stories we absorb and remember. Stories that tell us who we are, why we're here, and what we're capable of. We may have long told ourselves a limiting story, like I can't follow through on hard things, and unconsciously we always look for evidence to reinforce that. And stories are just as formative when they're shared. They define collective identity, align common purpose, and make large-scale cooperation possible. A society will look and feel quite different if its core value is growth compared to one whose core value is health and well-being. Every movement, religion, nation, and economy is built on stories people have come to believe together.
Now here's where things get a little bit complicated. Remember that stories are originally born of human imaginations, which means they can only ever approximate reality or help us to envision what could be. They are never perfect representations. And if we understand this clearly, we see how this can become problematic. And a wise person or culture then chooses the stories they live by with the appropriate amount of care. Here's one way to look at the inner workings of stories so we can understand this a little bit more clearly.
Reality is just far too complex for us to fully grasp, so our minds constantly filter what matters, a process cognitive scientist John Vervaeke calls relevance realization.
Our stories inherit that same filtering. They simplify the world so we can navigate it, but simplification always involves choice. Every story leaves things out.
Think of this fictional example, but one we've likely all heard. She succeeded because she was in the right place at the right time, which is a story that points to one important variable, but ignores the fact that things like hard work, persistence, and mentor support were likely also essential. Or take the story of GDP. We've measured the performance of nations based on that simple metric for a long time, but it ignores things like health, ecological well-being, equality, and human happiness. And yet, that simplified story has shaped policies, priorities, and decisions at every level of society. The stories we choose as cultures determine what we perceive and what we ignore. When stories are shared by billions of people, they shape the earth itself. There are a couple more dynamics of storytelling worth noting. Repeated stories come to feel true, even if they're not. Emotionally charged stories stick, regardless of accuracy. And this is why dystopian stories that are initially untrue, or at best partly true, can become true.
Now we see why stories are powerful and why they carry profound responsibility. Many of the stories that shape our lives are not ones that we would consciously choose. In the modern world, most of the stories that we absorb don't come from thoughtful reflection or careful and rigorous debate, but instead from the loudest and oftentimes the most emotional voices, from eye-popping headlines, viral posts, and narratives that are designed to capture our attention rather than offer us truth and wisdom. I'm not saying that all of our shared cultural stories are harmful. I'm simply saying that too often we are unconscious as individuals and societies to the stories that we let in and just how profoundly they shape us. So, if this is the reality, what can we do about this story of stories? Well, the first step is to become intentional, active participants in choosing and shaping the stories we live by. That might sound impossible in such a noisy, fragmented world, but there is a clear way forward.
Participatory storytelling is how people everywhere can learn to reclaim the stories we live by, to make storytelling an active and empowering process, together with our neighbors, our communities, and our places. Done well, participatory storytelling helps us co-author resilient, life-affirming narratives that are deeply relevant to our local realities and that can continually adapt as the world around us shifts and changes. It's place-based participatory storytelling that enables us to become intentional authors of more just, regenerative, flourishing futures.
The role that Awakening Lands is playing in this story of stories is developing the returning home participatory storytelling journey.
In a world saturated with dystopian and disconnected stories, this is a conscious act and an evolving practice of choosing the stories that lead us home, stories that bring us back into relationship and belonging with one another, with our communities, and with the living places we inhabit. Stories that intentionally guide us toward collective thriving in a world we love to call home. Returning home holds the space and provides the process for communities to become their own protagonists, their own heroes, and their own unfolding stories. It offers a sort of participatory storybook with 3 chapters that community story circles can walk through together. Each chapter reflects a universal pattern of coming back into relationship, belonging, and ever-deepening care for place.
The first chapter is about remembering, individually and collectively, the living story of the places we call home, awakening the innate longing for belonging and connection that lives within us. This includes the wider living worlds we inhabit, that in so many ways we've forgotten in the modern world. The second chapter explores what is revealed when we do remember. We encounter stories of suffering that were hidden, possibilities that inspire us, and transformations within ourselves that begin to emerge. The third chapter explores what it means to truly become a people of place, and the practices, commitments, and shared actions we can begin now to walk this return home together. Imagine being part of a living story of place, one you're not just reading or hearing about, but actively co-authoring and bringing into reality. A story that deepens belonging, strengthens relationships, regenerates the land, and illuminates a brighter future for all. Imagine how it feels to gift this story to your children and future generations. This is the power of bringing intention to story. And when we practice storytelling in this way, we don't just imagine a brighter future, we live it into being. And together, we become heroes in the greatest comeback story of all time.